Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Friday for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. All right, guys, welcome back. Eric and Matt here with LLP. We're finally getting back into doing some LLP podcasts. Wow, a little bit of a hiatus there.
Yeah, man, we've been super busy. I'm really excited to get back in here and talk about some really, really good topics.
Yeah, man, we're going to get into it. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, lots of things going on. We are going to be discussing deer hunting season 2021.
Oh, yeah.
And I did put a Twitter poll out to ask some questions, so we will be fielding a few questions on today's podcast. Also, if you're tuning in here on YouTube, on Iraq Veteran 8888, thank you for tuning back in. We're going to dive into some cool concepts, and we're going to talk about, gear, tactics, ethics. Mm-hmm. We're going to really dive into the rabbit hole on deer hunting. I really enjoy hunting whitetail deer. I just love the concept of deer hunting, and we are going to really get into a lot of fun stuff today. This is an hour-long show, so buckle in, crack a beer, and hang out, and we're going to get rolling with it.
All right.
Okay. But before we get started, I would like to thank our friends at Sonoran Desert Institute for supporting LLP. Really great group of people. If you're interested in a career in gunsmithing, you want to learn more about gunsmithing technology, reloading, and you're looking for a career in that field, they're definitely the go-to group of people to look into. Great distance learning programs, wonderful instructors, tons of ways to pay for it, financial aid and things like that. So look into them. Sonoran Desert Institute, SDI. All right, we're going to get cracking in on this here. And so I guess before we get rolling too hard on the subject matter at hand, just how's life in general? Let's kind of get caught up real quick. It's been, about a month since we've recorded
It's probably
LLP?
been like 2 months. We've just been so busy. Both you and I, both just going gangbusters, like all kinds of things. On the ballisticking side, we're getting in a whole bunch of new equipment, getting that installed. We did some upgrades, so we're going to be able to get those orders out faster. And it just kind of refreshes the shop and, gives us some new technology to work with there, and doing a lot of traveling, traveling with the family, vacations and stuff that you don't get to do for the entire year. And then you get a couple of weeks here and there to go spend some time with the family. And guys, do not neglect your family. I know everybody wants to work and be successful, but take a couple weeks out and refresh the batteries.
Wise words,
oh, yeah.
For sure. Sometimes you don't want to get burned out. Sometimes you just have to step back from a situation, take a little bit of time, and have a mental break. Mental health break is what I like to call it, because it is really easy to get, wrapped up in all the work that you're trying to do. And, Chad and I have been filming like madmen, tons of different videos that we're making on the channel. If you're tuning here on LLP and you don't know about the YouTube channel, I'm not sure why you wouldn't, but right. I guess because you probably follow us because of the channel. But it's Iraq Veteran 8888 there on YouTube. We've got tons of videos, and we've been filming like absolute madmen. And, we also have our guitar channel, Guitarsenal, shameless plug, if you will. Bing. And we do equipment reviews, guitars, amps, and things like that. I swear we are going to get into deer hunting. But in these podcasts, we do go on some different tangents. I hope you'll bear with us on that. But I took a break from that as well, because, sometimes you have to just take a step back from something. I haven't posted a Guitarsenal video in 3 months,
right?
But because I wanted to sort of just step back and sort of reprogram a bit. And I don't even think I've touched a guitar in 30, 45 days, and that's okay. Sometimes it's all right to just take a step back. So good to hear. Glad the trip's going well, but I'm really looking forward to deer season. This year. One of the places that we hunt's down at our friend Linton's place down outside of Colquitt, near Leary, Georgia. So it's way down in the boondocks.
Don't give him too much info, man. You're going to give it away.
That's right. Way down in South Georgia is where we do our hunting and all. And he's a real nice fellow. And, we do have the unique opportunity to get down there and really do a good bit of work on the property. And, we get in there and cut the lanes, and we plant the food plots. and we set up stands, and we check the stands for wasp nests and critters. And
you don't want to get in that stand and then you're like staring at a mean old hornet or wasp's nest, and you're like, oh, it's only a matter of time before these things come out.
That's right. Or you're in there with them and they're not bothering you, and you go pow, and you shoot a rifle, and then they lose their minds and start attacking you. I've had that happen. So we've definitely made a point to keep some wasp spray.
That's right.
In all the deer stands.
You have
to. We'll talk about that a little bit. Rifle season just opened up last weekend, and here in Georgia, I know some of our listeners and viewers, you may not necessarily, be in Georgia, and I know some of the states have different seasons for when the rifle seasons, open for deer and everything like that. But here in Georgia, it was last weekend.
Yep.
And I'm always torn about it because, the deer don't really start moving like crazy until it's good and cold. I'm talking nipply cold.
I think we experienced that last year. We got out there a little early. We were a little overzealous, and I don't want to say we wasted some time, but I think we could have done a little bit more with the time there than sitting in a blind. I think our time would have probably been better served maybe doing some grounds maintenance or something like that versus kind of hunkering down and not really seeing anything.
That's right. Well, I did get in the stand, this last weekend, and I only saw one small doe, not really anything worth shooting. The thing is, there's so much, especially if you hunt in South Georgia, that a lot of those farmers down there, they have peanut fields and corn fields, and they're still harvesting a lot of that stuff. So if they harvest a cornfield and you got volunteer corn laying all over the place and coming up, there's so much food for the animals to eat right now. There's just not a lot of competition for food. There's still acorns on the ground. There's still volunteer corn. There's still peanut shards and all kind of stuff they can eat on. So they're not really having to fight for food right now. There's an abundance of food and an abundance of that. So, that makes it a little bit harder. It makes the deer a little bit harder to predict. And plus the weather, opening day of rifle season, I think it was 75 degrees during the day.
Yeah, it was pretty warm.
Yeah, and even in the morning, it was only like maybe 58, 60 degrees. That's still pretty hot.
I think it just started dropping down to about the 40s maybe 2 or 3 days ago. But other than that, it's been relatively warm. I just wanted to touch on how fortunate we are here in Georgia to have such a long deer season. I've been talking to a lot of guys in other parts of the U.S., and the seasons vary widely on how long they are, the types of weapons. Here in Georgia, we can use bottleneck cartridges, so that's great. Our season is very long compared to a lot of places. We're starting October 16th, and it runs through January 3rd, so you're talking almost 3 months worth of hunting, bag limits, like 10 doe, 2 bucks. I was talking to Tim from Military Arms, and he's over in Indiana, and they get 2 weeks out of the year, and it's straight wall cartridges only. And it just kind of limits you on it. If you don't have the time to get out and hunt within those 2 weeks, well, you're kind of at an impasse. You don't get that opportunity. You have to go out of state. And once you start going out of state, you're paying out of state licensing fees to hunt. It gets considerably more expensive than hunting in state. And, I did extend the invite over to Tim. I said, hey, we have a very long deer hunting season. So anytime you want to come down, come on down. We'll get you out there. And while Georgia isn't known for having the biggest bruisers, I think that just getting out there and having that extended season, you get a lot more opportunities to get out there and get you some venison than you would in another part of this country.
Yeah, Georgia has some really, really big deer for sure. But Indiana, you get up in those cornfields up there, and it is absolutely insane how big the deer can get in some of these states. I know Tennessee, they grow some really big deer up in there, so it just depends on where you're at. There are areas in Georgia where there's some absolute bruisers, certainly. We can sort of segue that into land management and deer management. Let's just sort of talk about that a little bit. We are going to field some questions from Twitter here in a little while. I'm letting some of those questions float in. I just now posted the tweet just a few minutes ago, so we'll let those questions start floating in a little bit. But we'll talk about management. So, when you're talking about hunting on public land, you're kind of at the mercy of everyone else around you, right?
That's right.
So Public land, yeah, deer tend to be kind of small because
They're pressured.
typically most of your hunters on public land are going to shoot whatever the heck they see. So, all right, say
you.
that you let some 8-pointer or 10-pointer walk because it's not a deer that's of a quality that you would shoot. Maybe it's not large enough. Maybe you've already shot a few 10-pointers and you want a nice big 12 or 14, or maybe a deer that has a larger spread if you're trophy hunting. If you let that deer walk in the hopes of, all right, well, maybe next year he'll be a bigger deer.
No.
He probably ain't going to live another year.
Not at all.
Because someone else is going to shoot him. So there tends to be that you have to deal with a little bit too. But also your buck population is pretty closely tied to your doe population, right? So if a property has a lot of does on it, you're also going to have a lot of bucks.
Yep.
Because those bucks are chasing does, right? Now there is a little bit of a series of diminishing returns. You don't want to have too many doe on your property, but you want a healthy doe population for sure. So, lots of farmers this time of year and people that are managing their deer camps and stuff, they'll start getting their food plots in. They'll plant winter rye. They'll plant, all different types of clovers, winter peas, things like that, just to give the deer some forage and everything to ensure that they're good and healthy. We feed them corn. So we get a giant gondola of corn, and we go through and we feed them tons of corn, as much corn as we can afford to feed them throughout the year. And corn is rather expensive, especially right now. And Georgia just recently changed the baiting laws to where you can bait pretty much all over the state of Georgia right now. So the whole baiting thing that used to have zones, and certain zones you couldn't bait in, that's no longer an issue now. You can bait in the entire state of Georgia. And the ethics of baiting, some people go, well, why would you hunt over corn? Is it not ethical to hunt deer over bait? Well, my answer to that is a little bit of a twofold sort of thing, right? Well, how many deer eat that corn? We're talking thousands of pounds of corn over the whole property throughout the year.
I think we went through like a whole couple pallets last season.
We did.
It was like 3 tons, I believe.
It
was literally
last
tons.
Season. It was like almost 6,000 pounds of corn we fed the deer on the entire property. How many deer eat that corn that we don't see or shoot versus the ones we do? So when someone thinks, oh, you're hunting over corn, well, yeah, you're hunting over corn, but that's where you're trying to train the deer to come into that area, right? But you're also feeding the deer. How many deer do you not shoot versus what you do shoot that they're going to be fed and healthy? All right, so you've got the rut, and then the bucks and does are pairing up, and then the does are carrying babies, right, at some point, after nature takes its course, right? Well, in order for mama to have a healthy buck, right? We want to talk about raising bucks, big deer.
That's the management aspect.
Management aspect, growing big deer with big racks. Nutrition for that buck starts in mama, right? So the better that deer is eating, I've got nutritious food out there for them. We've got forage we've planted for them. We put protein out there for them, mineral blocks, salt blocks. There's plenty of water on the property. There's plenty of areas on the property that we don't mess with.
Oh, there's tons of areas. So the deer have
a nice sanctuary. They know they can go there and not get pressured, right? So the lack of stress that is caused by that and all the abundance of food, mama carries a nice healthy buck. And that's how it starts. Good genetics and a good healthy deer starts inside of mama, right?
That's right.
So that's important. So yeah, you're going to shoot a few deer on the corn, of course, but you're also going to let numerous ones, probably 10 times or 20 times as many more, walk throughout the year. So I don't really think that hunting over bait is unethical at all. It's just part of the process. It's a tactic. Some people get out there and spot and stalk and walk around, sneak around. You can certainly do that. I tend to be a stand hunter, but in my defense, it's also because we film a lot when we hunt. So when you're filming hunts, it's really hard to have a couple of cameramen being sneaky and staying still, and you're trying to play the wind, you're trying to be quiet, and you're trying to sneak up on an animal and shoot it. Come on. Well, it's impossible with a cameraman.
And a lot of it is regional. You will hardly ever, I've never even done a spot and stalk in the Southeast. It's a regional thing. It's not the deer here are very skittish unless you're on a super high fence area where they're kind of not skittish and you're able to find them. But we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But spot and stalk hunting, you usually get that out in the Midwest, and where there are plains, you have very good visibility, long lines. Here in the Southeast, it's very, very heavily wooded. You have a lot of different terrain changes, and your only choice is to either do a tree stand or a ground blind. And as far as, I guess, I would say baiting, when you put the corn out, like Eric said, you're kind of training those deer to come in and eat, but it's still a tactic. Those big 12-point bucks didn't live that long by just going out and nomming on some corn whenever you throw it out. It's still a cat and mouse game. You still have to be there at the right time. You have to choose the right area of that land. You have to play the wind. People have this misconception that you throw corn out on the ground and it's some magic powder and all the deer just come clamoring towards this corn that's on the ground. Or you go get some an acorn crush or apple crush, and these guys are going to come running from miles away to get this corn.
Yeah, it's a dual prong type of thing. I mean, obviously the corn is going to bring the deer in and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But you're right. The big mature bucks, you're going to have to employ a little bit more smart tactics to get those guys to come
rattle
in
bags,
to shooting view.
antlers,
you have to rattle them in. You've got doe urine and other scents and things. And also, it's about understanding your doe population and what they're doing. I mean, a lot of bucks that I've shot that are decent-sized bucks, it's always been one of those deals where I'm really observing those doe and really watching what they're doing. And a lot of people tend to go, oh, a deer, and they get excited, and a deer walks out, and they shoot the first thing they see. But after I started really just waiting and not shooting the first thing you see, it doesn't matter if there's 30 doe in the field. Wait and watch them. Observe them. Once you begin to understand animal behavior, and more importantly in this situation, deer behavior, you really do start to understand how they act and what they do and what their body language is and you know, the different signs that they'll give you as to what's going on. And, you know, you'll learn to know when a doe's being chased. You can totally tell. You know, she'll look back behind her.
Keep looking behind her.
Yeah. So you see that going on, you kind of start going, okay, I'm going to sort of plan, I'm going to wait, and we're going to see what comes out, right? And that just comes with time. You learn those processes over time. Now, is that not to say that some big giant deer is not going to come into a pile of corn? Well, of course, they have to eat. They're creatures of habit just like anything else. They get up in the morning and stretch and they go, I'm hungry, and they want to go eat just like anyone else. They're going to go to the fridge and grab some food, and that corn is where they know to come into, especially when there's no more acorns on the ground, right? There's no truffles, there's no muscadines and scuppernongs and, you know, all the other natural things that grow in Georgia for them. Persimmons, they love those persimmons. So once all that stuff dries up.
They love cantaloupe too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, they sort of begin to get trained on where to go. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that. Let's take a moment to field. I do have one question here on Twitter. Let's go ahead and field a Twitter question. It's actually a great question, so I want to answer this one. Hang on, let me refresh the page. Okay. Let's see here.
Pick a good one.
It is a good question. And it's related to this. Does baiting have any connection with the spread of chronic wasting disease? And that comes from Winter Wheat 24 feet. Zowie Fender Blah 1. That's a really random Twitter handle. But yeah, thanks for the question, Winter Wheat. Let's define chronic wasting disease. Okay.
CWD.
Yep. All right. Chronic wasting disease is a neurological disease of deer, elk, and moose caused by infectious misfolded proteins called prions. Because of the abnormal shape, they aren't recognized and destroyed by the body when needed, so they stack up in clumps in the brain and nervous system tissue, and they kill the surrounding cells. Microscopically, this gives the brain a spongy appearance, which is why it's characterized as a transmissible spongiform, I'm not even going to try to say that word, TSE. Other more familiar diseases, such as bovine spongiform mad cow disease, all right, and scrapies, which is often in domestic sheep and goats, are also TSEs. TSEs are progressive, neurodegenerative, fatal disorders. Symptoms. All right, let's see. Symptoms will include traumatic weight loss, poor body condition, subtle head tremors that may occur, head and ears may be droopy, and in the last stages, it is not uncommon for the animal to have excessive drooling.
Yep. If you ever seen a deer with CWD, it's absolutely terrifying. They look like something out of The Walking Dead. On the later stages, they're zombies. Like skin is rotting away. They're walking in circles. It's like the end stages of Alzheimer's almost. They don't know what they're doing. It looks terrible. You just go ahead and put that deer down.
So how does it spread? And this is related to the question that he asked. The disease is transmitted through direct contact with body fluids, blood, saliva, feces, and urine infected with the prions. All right, so the reason he's asking this question is he wants to know if baiting has a connection with the spread of chronic wasting disease. Well, if the deer has chronic wasting and eats out of a pile of corn and spreads some saliva to the corn, sure, there could possibly be some spreading of chronic wasting disease with baiting. That's a possibility. Georgia, luckily, knock on wood, Georgia has some really excellent programs in place for controlling chronic waste disease, and we have one of the lowest rates of chronic waste disease of any other state in the Southeast.
It's zero.
We've literally have had almost no cases because we have such a great system for controlling that. Mm-hmm. And while I'm not saying that there's not a possibility that it could occur with baiting, you're right. Baiting is probably a contributing factor to chronic wasting disease in other states as well. So, yeah, I would say that baiting does probably have some minute connection, especially if you've got huge herds of deer coming into massive piles of corn and they're coming in close contact with each other. Certainly.
Yeah. And I'll kind of piggyback on that and say, that would be a contributing factor of the spread of CWD in other states that already have it. The number one contributing factor to CWD is actually the transportation of these animals across state lines. And that's the one way that Georgia has been able to combat CWD in general, is that state law doesn't allow any transportation of any type of prion or deer or elk or any of those animals even through the state of Georgia. So for example, if you have a exotic ranch, say for example, Tennessee has a lot of exotics, but they also have, they're the closest state that has CWD to us. And that's because they have a lot of these ranches or outfitters that are shipping in these animals from, say, Texas or other parts of the country. And that's kind of how that spread is coming in. Those animals are already infected. They're not showing any symptoms. And then they drop them off at their ranch. And then that quickly spreads. And then they get out. And then next thing you know, they're infecting the local population. So Georgia said, you know what? We don't want to take the chance. You can't even take your animals through the state of Georgia. You have to go around. And that's probably been the saving grace of the Georgia hunting whitetail population. Which I'm happy about, because it's really a pain in the butt if you go and hunt somewhere that does have a high rate of CWD, because you have to have it tested before you can even bag it and bring it home. So you shoot the deer, you have to load the deer up, take it to the DNR office, they have to inspect that deer, and then you can take it to the processor or process it yourself. So here in Georgia, again, we're lucky we don't have to deal with that. We shoot the deer. We almost know with 100% certainty that it's CWD free. We can just take it to the processor and eat it. Although there has been no known cases of CWD impacting humans with consumption, you probably don't want to roll the dice on that.
And that does allow us to segue into a few other Twitter questions if we want. We will get into a few more. Let's sort of talk about ethics a little bit. And, I think this is something worth acknowledging, not only in this podcast, but just in general. I know we posted our hog hunt the other day, and a lot of people were complaining, oh, well, that's not real hunting because it's high fence hunting and everything like that. So we'll talk a little bit about hunting ethics. And this is something I feel pretty strongly about. I'm very much a fair chase kind of guy. All right. I love the concept of fair chase, right? So someone would argue, well, if there's a pile of corn, is that really fair chase? Well, it is. I mean, the deer doesn't have to go into the corn, right? If I get out and walk around with a rifle and see a deer and shoot it, that's fair chase. If a deer's in a pen, I mean, obviously, that's not fair chase. That's high fence, right? So the difference between high fence hunting and fair chase hunting, high fence it's literally a pen, and the deer or animals in question, right, whether it's hogs or rams or whatever they might be, they're in a contained pen. Now, to be fair, a lot of times that pen is very big.
Very big.
We're not talking some little tiny caged-in pen where it's just an animal in a cage and you walk up and shoot. I mean, we're talking usually at least 700 to 1,000 acres usually, depending on the size of the ranch.
I would say that's pretty much a standard.
So, you know, it's a large area, but many consider it to be unethical because it's a lot more guaranteed. One would say guaranteed, right? Because the animals are there, you just a matter of finding them, and you go in there and do it. One thing that I will say about high fence hunting, I have done a good bit of high fence hunting, but I also do a lot of fair chase hunting as well. Our crocodile hunt that we went, or our alligator hunt we did earlier in the year, that was completely fair chase. Not any type of high fence thing, like you gotta find them, that sort of thing. All the deer hunts that I've ever done have been fair chase deer hunts, and I love it. I enjoy the idea of fair chase. I think it's ethical for it to be fair chase. I'm not a huge fan of high fence hunting. Most of the high fence hunts that I've done are related to filming, whether we're trying to demonstrate a product or we're trying to, try out a new cartridge or something, or quite frankly, we just, need to have a guaranteed kill so that we can get some meat, right? It's more of like going to harvest an animal.
That's what it is.
Than harvesting. It is to go hunting an animal. So we were catching a lot of flack on our hog hunting video. Well, we have a ram hunting video from the same place we're going to be posting.
Yep.
And it's great. It's fun to go out there and check it out and see what it's all about and be able to pick the animal you want. But it's a very different environment. Is it hunting in the traditional sense? Absolutely not. Right. Is it still cool, to go and experience it and do it? I guess that just depends on where your ethics lie. Now, when it comes down to like with us filming and everything, it's much easier to film in a high fence environment. Like we did a hunt with Sharp's Rifle Company a few years ago, and it was like a 700 or 800 acre ranch that was fenced in, and it's just full of hogs. All right, but you don't really know where they are, but there's an abundance of hogs.
Yeah,
it's not like they're going to leave the property, and there's a chance that they might not be there. So yeah, it's high fence, but it's still a pretty large area that they could be in, right? And so for the purposes of filming content and carrying around tons of gear and cameras and trying to maneuver firearms and get in there and actually get a piece of content that, is entertaining and informative and allows us to demonstrate certain products or ammo or whatever we're trying to, gather a little data on. Yeah, sometimes it's just helpful to do a high fence hunt so we can get the piece of content we need in order to serve our viewers and hopefully give them a little bit of information about what we're trying to show off. So high fence hunts are a necessary evil. In terms of my individual ethics, I consider high fence hunts to be a little unethical, but a necessary evil in certain situations. Or let's say that, for instance, there's some exotic animal that you want to shoot, but you can't afford to go to Africa. Well, you're not just going to bring in really expensive exotics, right? And then just turn them loose in the woods. Like, you're going to put that animal somewhere where you know where it's at. That is, for some, probably a little questionable, but there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, right? So don't think that when you watch some hunting show, right, and you see some guy swacking a, 250-inch deer with a bow, and he's like, oh, I watched this deer for weeks.
No, you didn't.
No, he didn't. I hate to say, but the likelihood of running into those deer that size in the wild and in just a completely fair chase environment, I'm not saying they're not out there, because they are. There's some bruisers out there, and some of them, they totally, they do it legit. But there are a lot of situations where, if you've ever watched a hunting show, you're watching high fence hunting. And that's just the bottom line.
You got guys that have lived in that area their entire life that hunt, and you as an outsider came in for one weekend with a bow and were able to track down this 300-inch whitetail in 2 days, and the guys that have been living in that land haven't hit that deer in 20 years. Yeah, you didn't just happen upon him. All right, it doesn't work that way. I kind of agree. I mean, high fence hunting, it does skirt the line of, what's ethical and what's not. I will say it does have its place, meaning, obviously if you're trying to do some filming, if you're trying to showcase a product, the silver lining is that it doesn't go to waste. Everything that we harvest, we take back. We filled up probably 3 or 4 huge coolers full of meat. I have hams, loins, we got everything under the sun, sausages. I've got all kinds of ram meat. I've eaten a ton of it. So what does this mean to me? If I go down to South Georgia and I'm capping, wild pigs, I'm not eating them. That's you're eradicating an invasive species. You're not eating it. When I go and hit a 500-pound hog, I'm eating it because I know that I can actually eat that. So it's not like you're wasting anything. You're still eradicating something that if it gets out, it could be trouble, but you're gaining something out of it. You're gaining meat, sustenance. Now, as far as going in for like some exotics, so if you're going after like fallow deer or Sikh deer or axis deer, those deer are skittish by nature. If you put them on a 1,000-acre high fence, you are not going to be able to pull your Polaris or side-by-side up, walk in, and just shoot it. They're going to hear you. They're still deer. They're still deer. Like they're still going to act like deer. So there is, and don't underestimate how big 1,000 acres is. That's 1,000 acres if it was flat. This is imagine being in 1,000-acre high fence with terrain. You have maybe 600, 700 foot elevation changes. You're still hiking in. It's almost, I would say, it's a spot and stalk light because you're still getting the action of a spot and stalk. You're still having to hike in to a certain degree. You're still taking probably a 300, 400 yard shot at most. So you're getting that experience. Is it a great starting point? Is that something you would maybe take your 14-year-old son on to get him warmed up? You're not going to break him in on a Colorado elk hunt on a 14-year-old carrying 40 pounds worth of gear and ammo and rifle and spotting stocks and everything. No,
that's right.
You're going to break him in on a canned hunt that's still like a light hunt, but he still gets the experience of carrying the gear.
That's right.
Kind of creeping in, setting up the shot, getting in that final firing position, breathing, hitting it. All the stuff that you get to experience on a traditional spot and stalk. And then when he gets successful at that, take him out and get him a tag for an elk or a bull or a moose, and you're good to go.
Well, canned hunts have their place, I believe, for certain situations. But I would say generally, though, I do enjoy, just a good old fair chase, right out there in the woods type of hunt, Mm-hmm. So I think we've covered ethics a bit, and I think that was a few of the questions that we were certainly getting in. It does allow us to segue possibly. I'm going to piggyback on what you said about hog hunting. So think about it like this. If you go to the store and buy pork, somebody had to shoot that or, euthanize that animal in order to butcher it out and put mm-hmm. it on the shelf. So if you do high fence, it's really you're just harvesting it yourself. It's the same.
It's a little bit more natural.
Yeah, it's the same concept. At least you can see where your food's coming from, and I don't know. Anyone can look at it any different way they want to, but that's just the way that I rationalize it in my head. Okay, I've got a question here from Zero Jaeger. This is on Twitter. Jaeger Danger. All right, he asks, what is the best way to field dress a deer and how to keep it cool for transport to a butcher? Now, the reason I want to field this question now is because I want to piggyback on what Matt said about taking down feral hogs. Now, this isn't necessarily related to deer, but it kind of is, right? If you're out in the field at night hunting hogs and it's 65 degrees and you shoot, usually on a stand, if you sneak up on a sounder of hogs and you shoot 8 or 10 of them, okay, so what Matt is referring to, all right, the clock's ticking.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so not only is it sweltering in 60 or 65 degrees, if that meat gets marginally over 50 degrees, you're getting into the point where it's going to spoil really quick. And you got to think they're already hot. They're already a warm animal. So you would have to get out there and really get to cutting and working really fast. You'd have to have a ton of coolers ready to go. And then there's really no guarantee that they're even all that great to eat. Some of them are real nasty and
gnarly looking, just beat up. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some of them are they're just not fit to eat, right? So, that's just one thing to consider. Now, all right, segueing back to deer, all right, how to transport it, how to dress it out. There's tons of information that you can access, tons of instructional videos and pictorial guides and things that'll show you how to properly dress a deer and everything. You certainly want to get the guts out of the deer before you try to move it if you can, everything like that. Now, to keep it cool, if you're hunting during the winter, I know it's going to sound strange, but like down at our buddy Linton's place, he'll shoot a deer, and all right, during the winter months, if it doesn't even get 55 degrees during the day at all, and at night, it's getting down to 28 degrees, well, you got a natural deer cooler right there in Mother Nature. I mean, I've known a lot of old timers, especially in the deep South. They'll hang a deer up different. Right out there. Gut the deer and hang it up right there, just out in the open under their barn, and just let it bleed out for a day or two. And as long as the temperature is not getting above 50 degrees, I've known of many old timers to go to cutting on that thing after just leaving it setting out for a few days.
Great example is that very first trip we went down there last year. That's exactly what we did. I took that smaller doe on the first day just for camp meat, and Linton strung it up. You've dressed it out. He came up, and we ate off that thing strung up 3 days.
And it was delicious.
And we went out there every night, cut off what we needed, left it hanging. It was about, maybe 40 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Natural cooler, no flies, no bugs. It just hung up there. Blood was coming out of it. And
now... All right, how to keep it cool for transport to the butcher. All right, so if you're going to take it to the processor, just take it to the processor.
Yeah, throw it in the back of the truck.
It's fine. Like, it would have to sit out a considerable amount of time to start to spoil, but you obviously, you don't want to wait around. I mean, don't put the deer in the back of your truck or whatever and then go have a hot dog in town and then run some errands and go to Walmart.
Showing off your deer in the back of your truck.
And leave him sitting for several hours or whatever. I mean, dress the deer out, take it straight to the processor, and you're not going to have an issue. It will not spoil. Now, if it's super hot, I mean, I don't know why you would shoot a deer in the summer months where it's 100 degrees, but obviously if it's really, really, really hot, or if it's just, say, anywhere above 50 degrees, time is certainly working against you. You want to be as fast as possible and get that deer to the processor. So thanks for the question.
And also, don't feel obligated to dress that deer out yourself. You don't have to do that. I mean, sure, you can if there's no processors around, or if you just want to learn to do it, that's fine. It is an art. And by, dropping those guts, you save yourself about 30 pounds worth of weight, on moving it around. But, there's nothing that says you have to do it yourself, and that processor is going to save, you're only going to save about $10. What was it, about $10 difference? Because we asked them, we were like, hey, if we drop the guts ourselves and dress it out and drop off the deer, what's the price difference? They said it's about $10. So why go through the trouble if you don't have to?
There's a couple of reasons for field dressing. I mean, one reason you field dress is so the deer's lighter to move around. I mean, so that's one of the obvious reasons, is you're dropping some weight, which makes the deer easier to transport. Also, sanitary reasons. You don't want all the bile and guts and all the bacteria and things that's inside of a deer and inside the organs to stay inside the deer. You want to remove it from said deer. I'm a little torn on how I treat the gutting part. It depends on where I'm hunting, right? A lot of guys, they'll gut the deer right there where they killed it. I have a bit of an aversion to that because, all right, think about it like this. All right, paint this mental picture, if you will. You went down to the local buffet to go have a meal, and there's a corpse laying in the buffet, near the buffet. Would you want to eat at that buffet if there was a dead person's guts laying on the floor? No.
They know it's blood. They know what it is.
Deer aren't dumb. Yeah. They're going to go, there's Johnny's guts on the ground. Yeah. So, maybe if you were to haul the deer off a considerable distance of where you're trying to hunt them and then gut it, that's fine. I would never gut the deer right where you killed it.
Right on the plot. No, you don't want to do that.
I wouldn't. I mean, now some people, they'll do it, whatever, you do you. But I'm kind of a strong believer that it freaks the deer out. They don't like it. I mean, would you? You wouldn't go to your grocery store and want to buy food with a person's blood guts on the ground, would you? No, you'd be like, what the heck? You'd go somewhere else.
Well, just think about...
They're the same way. They're not dumb. I mean, they know it's unnatural for that to be there.
Well, even think about just going into the meat section of your grocery store, and one of those little cellophane packages busts open and there's blood poured all over the rest of the good meat. That blood didn't even make it inside the package, and you're looking for one that doesn't have blood on it.
Yep.
So if we do that and it doesn't even affect the meat, imagine how a deer feels when he rolls up and says, oh boy, well, there's corn here, but it's soaked in blood. I don't know if I want to eat that.
Yeah.
So, but then again, not everybody is dropping deer where they stand.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's something that's a not issue, but I've always just generally decided, you know what, I'm not going to dress my deer where I'm hunting. I want to remove the evidence of the crime, if you will.
Yep.
I want to take the deer. I want to take the memory of everything that happened, and it's gone here forever. Throw out some fresh corn, and I've actually hunted in one stand in the morning, shot a doe or whatever, removed all evidence, put out some fresh corn, and come back the same evening and shoot another one that same evening. So that doesn't always happen because they do get educated a little bit. After a while, I mean, if you've shot deer in one location on your property a heck of a lot, some of the older deer, they might kind of start to get smart to it. That might kind of turn them nocturnal. They might kind of go, you know what, this is a killing field. I'm going to go somewhere else. And they're not dumb, and they don't get big by being dumb.
That's right. That's the number one thing. You don't see these big 12-pointer, 200-inch deer get that big by just nomming on corn whenever you throw it out.
That's right. Or walking into a freaking killing zone. Exactly. Yep. All right, so we're going to field one more question from Twitter. This will probably be our last question from Twitter. This is from B-Tech at the Nomad Wanderer. He asks, why haven't they allowed no bag limits? Just one season. Tired of dodging herds of whitetail deer while I'm driving to work. I can speak for Georgia because we live in Georgia. That's right. I can't speak for other states, so this is kind of related to Georgia. But Georgia has an exceptionally good deer population. There's tons of deer, right? They're everywhere, right? And yeah, lots of people run them over. They get hit by vehicles, in the big cities, that have a little bit of woods in them. I mean, you can even have deer just showing up in very densely populated cities and neighborhoods and things. So deer aren't shy to get in there and take advantage of whatever habitat they can. So deer are pretty hardy, although, the weather and predators and natural causes does kill quite a few deer every year. They're a pretty hardy species, and they hang on quite well. And Georgia is just a great habitat for deer to thrive. There's lots of food for them, plenty of things for them to forage, plenty of habitat for them to bed up and lay in and sleep in. So, yeah, Georgia has a really healthy deer population.
And the climate is good, too. It's very conducive to, like, a deer habitat. It's not scorching hot. It's not, like, freezing cold, like, compared to, like, say, Montana, where it's, like, 10 foot of snow. And I agree with you. I think we have a very hardy population because of where we lie in the U.S.
We do. I think the current regs, if I'm not mistaken, in Georgia, is you can kill 10 does and 2 antlered deer per year. So it's 12 deer bag limit.
Yep. 1 over 4 though. Like one
has to be 4 better on one side on your buck, but you can shoot 2 bucks and 10 does. And some would ask, well, gosh, that sure is a lot of deer, and it is a lot of deer. To answer your question, Nomad Wanderer, he's asking, well, why not just have no bag limit? There'd be a lot of people that would take extreme advantage of it. You'd have people out there gunning down dozens of deer just to do it.
Yep.
Because there's no direct consequence. So, like, when you set a bag limit, not only does it help when it comes to conservation, right? The reason we set bag limits is because the scientists go through and they look at the deer population, and that bag limit is set based on the amount of deer that need to be culled or can be culled.
And how many hunters
from the population and how many hunters there are. So if, let's just say that the state of Georgia were to wind up getting a surge in hunting permits, and say they got like 15,000 extra hunters across Georgia that they would usually expect seeing in a given year, then yeah, you might see the regs drop that number down to accommodate the additional hunters, because you don't want to take down too many of the deer, because then you're going to, make the population of the deer dwindle a bit. So to keep the population healthy, there's a certain amount that can be culled from it. So the conservation efforts you do have to take some deer out of the population. If you let the population just run rampant based on whatever resources are there, the resources are going to get outstripped, and the overall health, the holistic health of the deer herd in Georgia will be greatly affected in a negative way because their populations outstrip the resources available to them. So the bag limits that we have are based on the science of, okay, how many deer can we stand to get rid of based on the amount of hunters and still have a healthy deer population?
Yep. Now, to go back to the previous question about field dressing a deer, that kind of correlates with bag limits, because let's just say you are a landowner and you own a 1,000-acre farm. You can field dress your own deer and it doesn't count against your bag limit. Now, I'm not saying that's what you need to do, but in that case, the only people that know that that deer is gone is you and the deer, because you're field dressing it, you're harvesting that meat. The only reason a bag limit comes into play is when you drop it off at the processor, because that processor has to mark it off as on your harvest record.
Well, it depends. So here's the thing. You're absolutely right. Some landowner who's got several thousand acres wants some camp meat or wants to kill a deer just to have some food for his family. There's a lot of old timers and a lot of folks have been around a long time and multifamily generations. Yeah, they'll go kill a deer and dress it out, put it in the freezer, and that's the end of it. And they're not even going to involve DNR. They're not going to report it. They never have reported it. And that's just the, you're not going to get around that particular aspect. So Georgia actually changed the law and the regs up just a little bit a few years ago. And it used to be, in order to tag a deer in Georgia, you had to have a hunting license, all right, and all of that stuff, and you had to have a harvest record. But now they have it to where if you own the land and you are only hunting on your land, you don't have to have a hunting permit, a hunting license to hunt on your land. They still encourage you to print out a harvest report and report the harvest, because that helps the scientists and that helps DNR kind of know how many deer are being taken from the population so that they can appropriately determine future regs and stuff like that,
and
future conservation efforts. So it's not that they're not telling you, hey, don't kill the deer on your own property. They're sort of kindly requesting, hey, please tag the deer so we know what's being removed from the deer population. And it's
And I think that's a good idea, because they also take into consideration out-of-state hunters. I mean, Georgia does receive, because the season is so long here, we do receive quite a bit of out-of-state hunters. A lot of hunters come in from Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, which basically is all flat terrain, South Carolina. So we receive a lot because of, where we're at. We don't have any CWD, and we have a very extended firearms hunting season. So, it's up to you if you want to report that as a landowner. It just helps with the bag limits in the future.
All right. So I want to spend probably the remainder of our podcast here today talking a little bit about equipment, about hunting rifles and things. We are a gun channel here on YouTube, and obviously here at LLP, we love our firearms and stuff. I would, before we get into that, I do just want to acknowledge a question. I'm not going to answer this question, but I do want to field this question just to segue into something here. Scott Ryman wants to know, hey, what's your favorite venison recipe? I'm going to refer that to a Manly Meals episode in the future that Chad and I are going to make on preparing venison. So stay tuned for that. We will answer that question in video form in a Manly Meals episode. Make sure you follow our Manly Meals episodes. All right, so thank you, Scott, for the question. All right, we'll move on to equipment. So Chad and I done a couple of videos here just the other day. So since we're getting into deer hunting season, things are just really getting rolling for the 2021 season. We decided to do a few videos. One was a top five guns videos that we did on deer hunting rifles. So expect that on the way. Also, we did a good solid roundup on different rifle cartridges, and we discussed obviously hunting implications in there as well. So that'll be up there to help some of you who want some more information on deer hunting cartridges. So with that being said, Matt and I will spend the rest of the podcast here talking a little bit about some of our experience with different guns and stuff. So I know you used my Mauser Model 66 for your first hunt.
Yep.
But now you've got...
I got the M77 Mark II, which I am going to absolutely slay with this season. I did use the DD4 on the last hunt, which performed well. Ammo, not so much. Gun, flawlessly, except for the one hiccup, which you'll probably see in the next upcoming video. But yeah, I will say that I am leaning more towards bolt guns. I mean, I know that a lot of people now are getting into like hunting with the AR platform. It's very convenient. It's a one gun system. You can use it for hunting. You can use it for, shooting, like plinking. It does. It's nice, but there is a dramatic weight difference. And I'll tell you, when you're walking through the woods at, 4:30 in the morning in pitch black, you don't want to be carrying something that's that heavy. And you might say, oh, it's not that heavy. Well, it can be when you start weighing down with the optics and the can and the full magazine. And it's just nothing really beats a bolt gun with the weight.
Well, Chad hunts deer with a 300 blackout pistol, and he uses 110 grain Barnes load, and it performs quite well. The triple shock. So I like 300 blackout. I do have a Ruger M77 Mark II all-weather chambered in 7.62 by 39. That was a limited Davidson's deal. They only did like 100 guns. So that's one of the pride pieces of my collection. But I hunt with that rifle, and I love it. The M77 Mark II that Matt's got, I picked that particular gun up because I wanted to convert it to an integral suppressed 6.5 by 55. But I wound up running into quite a bit of pushback from a lot of gunsmiths because apparently the Rugers are not that easy to rebarrel. And they're very difficult to pull the barrel on. The receiver shape is kind of odd. And they're just not very conducive to customization. So I scrapped that idea and I thought, well, I picked this thing up in '06. And since he used my Mauser and loved the 30-06 so much, I decided, well, you know what, this needs to be Matt's hunting rifle. So he's now the custodian of that rifle.
Much appreciated.
And you've been using the 220 grain bullets in the '06?
Yes. So I got a 220 Power Shock. Awesome. That's what I'll be running this deer season. I remember we ran 220s. I think we ran Bond Strike last season. Yeah,
those were the Norma Bond Strike. Yep. Those are 180 grain bullets.
So we also ran some 220s at the very end of the season. We ran some 180s at the beginning of the season. We ran some 220s at the end of the season. Yeah. And then this season, I'm going to start with 220s as well. And I might switch it up to 180s at the end of it. We'll just do it backwards. Oh, man. We'll see.
So, all right. My hunting rifle, one of the primary hunting rifles I'm going to be using this year is another M77 Mark II. This one's a blued action, but it's in an all-weather boat paddle stock. And some of y'all that are tuning in on YouTube here, you may recall the 9.3 destruction video, also our mystery of the 9.3 video that we put up, where we had the 9.3 by 62. And I picked that gun up very late in the season last year. I didn't have an opportunity to hunt with it. It was a Christmas gift from my wife. I've got that gun set up. I'm shooting 285 grain soft points.
Ooh-wee.
And I know that's heavy medicine. Some of you are thinking, wow, that's a lot of gun for a deer. But I'm going for hopefully some bruisers. Yep. I'm going to harvest a few does for the fridge and everything, but I'm really trying to antler hunt this year and really let the tiny deer walk.
Yep.
Unless it's a monster 8 or a monster 10, it would have to be a big 8 or 10 for me to even justify shooting it, but I'm going to let anything under a 12 walk unless it is an absolute bruiser. Now, that's weird. Sometimes you'll see an 8-pointer that might be a 120-inch deer, even only being an 8-pointer.
Got a big, thick neck on them.
Oh, God. I mean, so you also have to be able to gauge deer maturity, right? So if you look at a deer and it's got a huge 8-point rack and you're thinking, well, if I let that deer go and he lives till next year, he might shed his antlers and come back as a 12 or a 10 or something, right? So maybe grow bigger. But you get to a point where you can kind of gauge how old a deer is by the way he walks, the way he looks, how thick his neck is, the color in his face, how much gray he's got. If you happen to be able to look close enough to be able to see his teeth or possibly his feet, you can tell a lot by the way the deer looks, and you can begin to gauge how old it is. So if a deer is getting on, 6 or 7 years old or 5 or 6 years old and he's a huge 8, he's probably always going to be an 8. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to just harvest that deer if you're willing to fill a buck tag. Anyway, getting on equipment, I'm going to be using 9.3 by 62 and also my Norwegian Kamalader back here. And that gun's not just for looks. I do use it. I enjoy shooting black powder. Also, we have a hunt planned this year with the Air Force Air Guns Integral Suppressed 50 cal Texan.
Ooh.
So we will be taking some deer with air rifles this year and filming it. So stay tuned for that. Tons of stuff going on. I love deer hunting. And I think that it's a very important pastime and an important ritual for manhood. You know, you think about all the times that your dad or your grandpa took you hunting, the people that you're with. You know, hunting is about the camaraderie just as much as it is hunting the deer, right? You know, you spend 2 or 3 days or a week or however much time you spend doing the work at camp. You're getting things cleaned up. Mm-hmm. You're stocking the camp with food. You know, you're doing your deer stands and your plots and your corn feeders and your cameras and all that stuff. All that work that you do, when it pays off, when you get to squeeze the trigger and harvest that deer, it's a fulfilling feeling to know that your hard work helped pay off to put all the wheels in motion to make that happen.
Yeah, and that's really one of the big things about deer hunting is if you're just going into like public land and you're walking in you park the car on the side of the road and you and your kid are walking in and you're using somebody else's tree stand or you're using a tree stand that's already established, okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you have the opportunity to have a piece of land and maybe you don't buy it, maybe you lease it, or you have friends that kind of manage their land and you're putting in work and you're going in and you're cutting lanes and you're planting plots and you're trying to do this with your family. So, I mean, not just boys. Sometimes you'll have your wife help you out. They can get out there and help as well. And you're putting in the work. It's so much more fulfilling because you're not just out there hunting for sport. Like it's hard to describe. If you've never been deer hunting and you're looking at this deer and you're looking at it through the optic and you're watching it and you're like, man, this thing is amazing. This is a majestic animal. And then you say, but he looks good. He's going to make good eating. And bam, hit them. They drop. The feeling is not remorse. The feeling is like, I'm going to be able to eat this animal and provide for my family. It's indescribable. Like it's just one of those things where I really enjoyed it because it allows me to, I guess, without sounding like chauvinistic, like what you just said, it is kind of like one of those manly things where you're like, hey, I'm able to get out there and do what a traditional male was supposed to do. That's provide for your family.
You know, I think that the way that I approach it, and we're getting towards the end of the podcast here, but I'll just reiterate this. I've said this in a few previous videos, but I'll say it again. I love animals, right? I love dogs, cats. I love animals, and I'm more comfortable around animals than I am people. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe that says I'm an okay person for that reason, but I prefer the company of animals, and I like watching the deer. I love observing them, watching them. I love the deer. You know, I don't want to hurt the deer, right? You want the deer to be healthy and happy and to live their lives, and it's fulfilling to know when you're doing the plots and the feeders and everything that you're helping the herd have food through the winter, and you're helping them survive through the winter and helping them have a better chance of living a fulfilling life, you know. But it's also, as much as I love them, you know, I'm a carnivore. I eat meat.
It's a circle of life.
So it's a consequence of being at the top of the food chain. So whereby, I love watching them. Even if I didn't have a rifle, I'd love to sit in a deer stand and just observe the deer. And I've done that before, right? Like when I'm scouting and stuff, you know, even before deer season, I'll just sit and observe. I love the deer, but it's also one of those things that I eat meat, you know, and so it's a sacrifice. It's something that, you know, that animal is sacrificing its life force for me to take and to use for me to survive. So it is a circle of life in a way, right? So think about all the deer that we're feeding that go on to live and go on to reproduce, and the herd lives on. We're just taking a few sacrifices out of the herd in order for our time, I guess, is the way I would look at it. So I do view it as a sacrifice that the animal, you know, we have to receive that sacrifice and receive it with honor and respect.
That's big, though, yeah.
And that's why I do look at fair chase. When I think fair chase hunting, I think more of this way of getting in the woods and making things happen. I mean, high fence hunting is an unfortunate byproduct of needing to film and things like that, but also a byproduct of needing to shoot certain species that just aren't indigenous to this area.
Mm-hmm.
So in light of that, high fence does have its place. I prefer more of a fair chase environment like what we do down there. So it's going to be a great year. So I hope you guys get out and get some deer hunting in. Thank you so much for listening on today's podcast. If you're watching here on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Many more podcasts on the way, many more YouTube videos here on the way. Thanks so much for tuning in. And also big thanks to all of our Twitter followers that came in and provided some questions for us that we could answer. Hopefully we gave you adequate answers on that.
Hopefully.
And we're getting back into doing podcasts. We hope you'll tune in with us every Saturday on YouTube, every Friday on all of your podcast serving platforms. So hopefully we'll be back on track a bit. Thank you so much. Many more on the way. Guys, live free, be happy, be careful out in the woods. More on the way. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Inc. by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, dangerous freedom. Have a good one.